Hey, welcome to Webmasters FM. Today I have Katie Keith of Barn2 Plugins, who I'm really excited about. Katie, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, hey Brian, thanks for having me.
I think we've met in person at WordCamp,
Yeah,
right?
it
Yeah,
was
I think we
quite
have.
brief though. You're like one of these people on my radar that I know I'll see more in the future, but haven't much yet. Do you get that with people in the WordPress community?
Yeah, I know for myself, I'm pretty socially awkward. I work at home, so I don't. So,
It's
so I think when
WordPress.
yeah, I think you get there and it's a lot of people, and you feel like you're trying to say hi to everybody, but you're also trying to
Mm.
be polite of people's time. So I kind of struggle with that. I don't know. Yeah. So I kind of want to talk to you today because in my professional life, I recently joined the team at WooCommerce, which is something that I actually didn't have a lot of experience with. I was a WordPress developer at a WordPress agency for years and years and years, and we did WordPress stuff, but didn't really do a lot of WooCommerce stuff. But now that I've seen sort of the inside of it, there's like a few people in the community that kind of have sort of a outsized presence, and you're one of those people. And I just kind of wanted to hear your experience being like a WooCommerce person. So how long have you been in the WooCommerce community?
Um, we built WooCommerce site since, I don't know, 2012 or something like that. But I'd say I've only been in the WooCommerce community since 2016, probably, when I started attending WordCamps and releasing plugins for WooCommerce.
And when you think of the WooCommerce community, where is it? Where are these people? Or how do you connect with other WooCommerce people?
I've been around long enough that I have many different ways that I connect with WooCommerce people. It's basically a subgroup of the wider WordPress community with a huge overlap, but there is a sub WooCommerce community. One place would be Twitter or X, where there's specific people who discuss WooCommerce and are kind of leading the discussions about its future direction. You've got, for example, James Kemp from Woo, who's leading the discussions about the technical future of Woo Core, and people that really feed into that, like Rodolfo from Build Business Bloomer, and plugin company owners that focus on WooCommerce like myself. But there's also discussions on other places like various Slack communities and people just getting to know each other and talking independently as well.
Do you there's a lot of people that are, say, in Elementor, but they don't really identify as WordPress. They kind of just identify as Elementor. Is there a WooCommerce mindset like that that's we don't think about WordPress really, we just think about WooCommerce? Or do you think it's very tied with WordPress?
I think it's very tied with WordPress community-wise and platform-wise. The only time I've seen people just focus on WooCommerce is when they're positioning their business. We don't do this at Barn2 because we have a few non-WooCommerce plugins, but companies like Studio Wombat and Iconic just do WooCommerce. So if you go on their website, they'll say plugins for WooCommerce rather than necessarily WordPress plugins like a more generic company might do. So that's the main way I've seen it, which allows them to focus on that niche.
So I've been very curious about this because there's so many WooCommerce extensions. They have their marketplace. There's 1,000, I think, extensions in there now. But then there's all these plugin shops and stuff. And who is buying WooCommerce extensions? What is the target audience? Are these developers? Are they agencies? Are they actual merchants opening stores? Who are your customers?
All of those. In terms of our customer base at Barn2, it's about 50-50 with actual merchants who have their own stores and are looking for plugins which they will install themselves, and developers or agency who are buying those plugins on behalf of clients. In terms of value to us, we would value the agencies the most because they're the most likely to be repeat customers. For example, they might buy our All Access Pass and look for Barn2's plugins first for all of their projects in WooCommerce, whereas the merchants, lower value, although still very important and similar numbers wise. And it's interesting because you often hear about WooCommerce as being more for people building sites on behalf of others, whereas they might turn to something like Shopify if they wanted to do it themselves. But I think that's largely a myth because we see an awful lot of people building their own sites in WooCommerce. And similarly, since getting more into the Shopify space, which I think we'll talk about later, I've discovered that apparently the majority of Shopify stores are actually built by agencies or developers. So I think actually it's quite a similar market in that particular sense.
Yeah, You had a tweet recently, I think it was you, right? About, is WordPress in general for people that like, is it for people that want something easy, or is it for people that want something more technical and customizable? Am I framing that question right? Or maybe you could frame it better. Do you know which tweet I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's right. So it came from a Do the Woo episode. Am I allowed to reference other podcasts?
Yes, because I have a question about Do the Woo. So yes.
Okay, so I co-host Do the Woo product chat with James Kemp, and we had guest Ben Rittner from Cadence on, and we were talking about the balance between customizability and flexibility in WooCommerce and WordPress products. And we got onto a discussion which was a bit off topic about WordPress itself, and should WordPress be easy enough for the average user to just pick up who hasn't used it before and just figure out, and whether the interface should even aim to be that. And Ben and James sort of said they like the idea of that, but maybe that's not its target audience and not the priority. And so I started tweeting about that and did a poll as well. And the majority of people said, actually, yes, WordPress should be for everybody. And if it's not, then it needs to change. I think WooCommerce that applies to as well, although it's difficult for WooCommerce because it's part of WordPress, so it doesn't have full control over the user experience in a way that, for example, Shopify does, where everything is about that e-commerce store. With WordPress and WooCommerce, the Woo store is just a part of another site which might have other massive plugins like events plugins and learning management plugins all on the same site.
Yeah, I go back and forth on this one a lot. And I was listening to that episode this morning while I was walking my dog, and I wanted to ask about this because you give the example of, I think it was your dad, where you give him a WordPress website, but he liked the kind of simpler builder that's, a little bit easier. I've had the thing of where a friend or family comes for a website and then I give them WordPress and it never works out. Like, they never want that because they're not technical at all. And then I've learned now I send them to Squarespace or something like that if they just want like a simple basic website. Do you still see WordPress as like, I'm going to send it to like the average non-technical person and give it to them, or should we just like let that go and just say like, no, WordPress is powerful. It's not a user-friendly tool. It's like a power-friendly tool.
I don't think we should let it go, because I think that should be its goal. If you think about the whole philosophy of democratizing publishing, that's about publishing for all. And the current complexity of things like the block editor for beginners isn't achieving that goal. So therefore, I would say it should be trying to do that. However, currently it's not. And if I was I did recommend to my dad for his next website not to use WordPress. I know what a pain it was for everybody, him and me, in supporting him when I tried to help him with WordPress. And he just wants something template based where you drag your content in, you can't change the layout, nothing can go wrong. And that's not WordPress unless you find some modified version of WordPress, maybe a hosted version of it or something where the host has done that to WordPress, which actually I think would be quite a good service to offer. But unless it's something like that, then I don't think you should recommend it to true beginners who aren't willing to learn.
Yeah. And, there's definitely an argument that WordPress should be easier. I think of like Substack had got really popular, and it's popular because it's so easy. You can't change I don't even think you could change your font. I don't know. You can maybe change your colors. You can change your font a little bit, but like it does everything. You don't have to think about it, but you can't break it. You can control it. But I have to imagine that for someone like you do want that complexity, because that's what your business is built on, is the fact that it can be complex and customizable and stuff like that. And if WordPress were like dumbed down, I guess there wouldn't be room for maybe developers and stuff. But I don't know. Do you think you can be powerful and simple at the same time?
Of course. And in the response to my tweet, I think it was Vikas Singhal from InstaWP gave about 10 examples of software that achieves that perfectly, where there is a really beginner-friendly version, but the more advanced options are there if you look for them. So I don't think anybody is suggesting taking away the flexibility of WordPress, which makes it the world's leading content management system and allows people to create any type of websites. As we've seen with with things like the speed builds that you've been on, where you can just do anything very quickly if you know what you're doing and you've been on that learning curve. But there should be a simpler version, and then the options are there for people that need them.
Yeah. And for the people that are buying plugins that are supporting the plugin ecosystem, they're definitely like power users, but there's not like, I don't know if I see them as like developers, or there's ever been a developer focus. Like, when you look at like the agencies and stuff building, do you think of them as like developers, like software engineers, coders, they're using build tools and all this kind of crazy stuff? Or do you see them as more like this kind of WordPress, like power user, extremely technical, maybe messes with code a little bit, but not entirely, not like a developer? I don't know. Do you see like the difference there in like people buying your plugins?
Yeah, I think of that as being what I would call an implementer, somebody that can do everything with WordPress, myself included, actually. I know how to use WordPress and I've built all sorts of websites, but I can't write a line of code. So I'd see that as an implementer, which is a different role to developer. And in terms of our customers, we get all of those, and our plugins are designed to be easy for anybody who's already used WordPress and knows how to install a plugin should be able to use our plugins. And we've got setup wizards and things like that so that you can easily get set up. But we've also got lots of developer hooks and filters for the people that do want to tinker around with them. So we would never assume that our users are developers.
Okay. Now, you've been exploring Shopify. Do you feel like how close is the Shopify market and those sort of people and the WooCommerce market? Do they feel very similar, or do they feel different?
I'm very new to Shopify and we're still building our first apps, so I don't have that direct experience, but I have spent the last almost 6 months now researching it in depth and getting to know Shopify app developers and that kind of thing. So I would say that from my research, the typical Shopify merchant has a larger volume. Apparently Shopify's whole business model is built around churn. They want people to try out a Shopify store and they know that 90+% will fail very quickly, and they don't care. They just want people to try it because they know that some of them will and be really successful, and they are the ones where the money is going to come from in Shopify. So that's their business model, and it's targeted at larger merchants. And I think that Woo's been flirting with that as well, maybe targeting larger merchants, but I think currently Shopify is probably doing a better job of attracting those larger stores, and that's borne out when you look at data on things like WooCommerce's market share, where on websites like Built With, I'm noticing that the growth is coming from smaller websites. So you can tell that by, is it in the world's top 1,000,000 sites or the world's top 100,000 sites or whatever. And when I last checked, only a couple of months ago, WooCommerce was growing in the all internet category, but not in the world's top sites, whereas Shopify was. So that also suggests that Shopify is attracting bigger stores.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, bigger store is bigger money, for either any platform that, monetizes based on payments. So it's understandable that anybody's going to want to do that. If your dad or somebody said, I'm going to sell, my whatever wood carvings or something on a store, where would you send them? WooCommerce or Shopify?
Very difficult, because I would want to send them to WooCommerce. I've been building my business on that for 8 or 9 years now, but it would be a dilemma. I would make that as an individual assessment on whether I think they could cope with not just WooCommerce, but the whole WordPress thing. Because like I said earlier, WooCommerce is built on top of WordPress. So they have to understand WordPress as a whole and the block editor, unless you've installed something like Elementor. And WooCommerce is just part of that decision. So I'd have to do it based on the person.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I don't know have you tried out Shopify for some of the other stuff that's maybe not the e-commerce stuff, but like you said, we have the block editor or page builder, something like that. Have you been experimenting with what it's like to actually set up a Shopify site and like just design your product page or something like that? Have you played with any of that stuff?
I've played with the product side. I haven't used the blogs or built custom pages or anything like that, which I probably should. I need so much more experience in Shopify.
Mm-hmm.
because you need to understand what people's needs are, don't you? So I haven't done that as much as I would like, but I have set up a basic store. And actually some things were better than WooCommerce, other things not so good. For example, I thought the variations were disappointing in Shopify. I thought they're called variants in Shopify. I'm trying to learn the new terminology. I thought actually it's no better or more intuitive than Woo, which I know wants to improve the management of their variations. So things like that surprised me. Whereas some things, like there's a thing called Flow. I think it's a free extension, but it's just part of Shopify really, which adds really complex Zapier-like logic, like if this, then that, to your Shopify store. So you can use it to create really targeted email flows, for example, which you don't see anything like that anywhere close to WordPress or WooCommerce Core. So some of it was more impressive and others wasn't really any better.
As like coming into really any marketplace, whether it's, well, in WooCommerce, are you on like the official marketplace or do you sell privately?
We're not. We only sell on our website.
Okay. What's the difference? I should know this because I work there, but like what, from your perspective, what makes you pick a decision on that?
We may well go on the marketplace at some point. Historically, we didn't, because they used to have very prohibitive terms, and also they took 70% commission, but that has changed. Their terms are now much more friendly and they only take 30% commission, I think, which is what we pay our affiliates. So I'm very comfortable with giving somebody 30% if they've got the sale for you. So I don't have any principled reasons in that sense not to do it. But we've grown enough that I feel that we don't need it. And I've spoken to several plugin companies who are on both, so on their own website and the Woo marketplace. And if they're good at marketing, as we are at Barn 2, then they typically get a lot more sales from their own website. So I would say that we don't need it. And the main thing putting me off is that we'd have to do a lot of development work to link its licensing system to ours. It's just a task that needs doing once, but actually it would be like quite a lot of work for one of our developers, and I would rather they were doing other projects at the moment.
And for Shopify, did they have a similar thing? Can you just sell stuff or do you have to go through some sort of marketplace?
You don't have to use the Shopify App Store, but that is the thing in Shopify. It's much, much more dominant than the Woo Marketplace. It is the place to go, a bit like the App Store with Apple. And so we are only considering going on there. I've been contacted by a few people that are setting up independent Shopify app marketplaces, but I've seen no evidence that anybody would look for apps on there. So we're going to do our usual independent marketing, like we do a lot of content marketing for our WooCommerce plugins, and we're going to do that for our Shopify apps too, but it will be on the App Store, and we will also do lots of work like to optimize and analyze those listings to try and get to the top and things like that. That's the main marketing channel for Shopify.
Yeah, for anybody that's like building an extension or selling software, feels like marketing is much more important, honestly, than writing the code. Like it feels like marketing and market research that's the thing that makes you successful or not. Are you with, everybody freaking out about AI and generative content and all this sort of stuff? Have you adapted your like marketing strategy at all? Are you like, is content marketing kind of your big push, and are you changing things?
We haven't really changed things because AI is recommending our products, and it seems that if you follow common sense with your SEO and try to provide content that real users want as well as search engines, that seems to cover AIs as well. So if more guidance comes out on optimizing for AI in the future, then we might tweak our strategy, but so far we're not. It is a difficult time. We've lost a lot of traffic in Google over the last year or so. This is the first year that our new sales are the same as they were a year ago. Our business is growing because of renewals, but new sales are static. But I think that's partly because of things like Google changes. I don't know if it relates to AI. And it's also partly because the WordPress industry itself isn't growing as much as it used to. We're not riding a sort of a rising tide like we used to be for most of our history.
Yeah, there was a growth to WordPress that I think we all benefited from, and I think, what are we like getting close to 50%? Like there's probably a natural plateau there somewhere that there's really no cure for. We all have our opinions on what WordPress should be doing differently to grow, and I know we've both talked about it. The one thing that I've been kind of curious about is how you kind of like get community feedback, because you and I are both pretty active on X/Twitter, and there is a large group of people there, but they're very it's a very like select group. Like it's not a good sample size. I would have to imagine that most of your customers, for example, aren't on there. I feel like most of the people using WooCommerce day to day are probably not on Twitter. They're probably in other places. And so sometimes I feel like the feedback that I see on Twitter is maybe not really widely representative of the larger, like the user base. Do you think that's true, or how do you think about that?
I do think it's true, and it is a worry that the following I've built and the people I'm communicating with on a day-to-day basis about how to grow my business and helping them to grow their businesses are not the target audience. So I know a lot of other WordPress product people and WordPress people in general, not so much WooCommerce store owners. So in terms of discussions on X and things like that, I get a lot of value from consulting with people who have similar experience to me. So they might share what's worked in their business. Maybe they've done some A/B testing or something and increased conversions, and I can implement that in my business, and vice versa. But they're not the target audience, and it doesn't tend to generate sales either, although it does occasionally. So the main way we get that kind of feedback is from our customers. So obviously our support team are talking to customers every day, and we've got a good process for recording feature requests and just general complaints, and like not everything's a feature request that can be improved. So there's a separate process that if a customer keeps getting stuck with something or there's a gap in the documentation, then the support team are now feeding that back to me on a monthly basis. We also send an email, I think it's about 7 or 14 days after purchase, asking for feedback. And I really like it when people respond to those in detail, which they quite often do, because they describe their whole journey of how they found our plugin and what other ones they considered and what prompted their decision, and then how they found it to use. So that's really helpful. And my favorite thing about that is when they tell me a keyword that they used to find our product that I'd never optimized for. So that's an instant content opportunity, which is always fun.
How do you get content out? I have to imagine you have a team, or do you have like a agency that you work with, or like a good system for that?
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird hybrid system, but it seems to work. We use the marketing agency Ellipsis, who specialize in marketing WordPress products. So they are very, very specific to what we do. And they do our so I just write my random ideas as they happen, which might be just an idea. It might be from a feedback email received from a customer to say, how about we produce an article on this, which we've not done before. And then every 3 months, they analyze all my random ideas and look for additional opportunities. And they propose a long list of content that we can produce, and then I make decisions on that and feedback. They've got an AI called Falcon that they've built in-house, which basically maximizes the likelihood that a piece of content will rank, and tries to reduce the randomness that a lot of bloggers have. So they provide Falcon titles and keywords and what the article should be about and an outline, and I then get that written by freelance writers, mainly to save money. I have experimented with in-house writers, but I haven't found the right person yet. So that's why I'm still using freelancers.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Like getting your ideas from support is such an interesting, like when I joined WooCommerce, when you join Automatic, then they talk about this. You have to do 2 weeks of being a support person as you're on. It's like you're kind of onboarding into the company. So I spent 2 weeks in like the WooCommerce like support, in one of their support teams, and seeing nobody comes to support usually like in a good mood. Obviously something's wrong and their website, is important to them. And so you see a lot of stuff, and you see a lot of interesting websites. And it really blew my mind just to see how big of a ecosystem there's, how many different extensions and ways people set things up, like how unique every store is, all the crazy things. Do you ever look at like your customer sites and just see like all the things that they're building with it and like their businesses and stuff? Have you ever bought something from a customer because you just saw their site and you were like, man, that's pretty cool?
I've never bought anything from a customer, but I really like visiting their sites. And one of the questions in our feedback email is, can you share a link to your site where you're using our plugin? And that's really insightful. I always keep a record of the different use cases and industries, and we use that to inform our marketing. For example, our sales page will focus on the use cases that we know are the most common to get people's attention, obviously. And also, if it's a really impressive site, then we will ask them if we can feature them as a case study, and our YouTuber will then get in touch and try and interview them and produce a video and some written content about them. So you can get a lot from visiting your customers' sites.
Yeah, that's been one fun thing, is seeing all the different sites. And I think at WordCamp Asia, they used like Woo merchants to like make the swag and all this sort of stuff. And so you get to see all these cool things people make. But, well, if most of the people that I know that listen to this, not a lot of people, but they are mostly developers. And so if you could give like parting words of wisdom to somebody who's maybe a developer, maybe they have like a extension or plugin idea that they want to like build a business, what would be like the first thing you would tell them to go out and do in order to be successful?
I think that the biggest thing that holds back developers' success with this is not working with marketers. So a lot of developers do everything on their own, and some developers have got really good at marketing and found success, but the majority that I've seen have remained small because they didn't know marketing. And often you focus on what you enjoy and what you're good at, don't you? And you put the other things to the bottom of the list, and you convince yourself that they're not important. So marketing is important, and if you're not someone that's going to prioritize that, and either hire somebody like Ellipsis, for example, we've been working with them since 2017, or go to WordCamps, tweet about it, whatever, be part of the community and find a business partner who is able to grow it.
Thank you so much, Katie, for talking to me today and going over all of this. I'm pretty optimistic. Seeing the inside of WooCommerce has really changed my like perception. Seeing the inside of WordPress, I do feel very optimistic. We'll have to talk someday about sort of a lot of your opinions on some of the direction and sort of stuff like that. But in the meantime, where do you recommend people go to follow you, follow Barn2, that sort of stuff?
For the company, go to barn2.com, and to see what I'm doing, go to my Twitter at Katie Keith Barn2.
Cool. Thank you, Katie.
Thanks very much.
Webmasters is hosted by me, Brian Coords. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to like and subscribe, leave us a review, or share this episode. For more, visit webmasters.fm. Until next time.